All right, folks, welcome to Nino's Corner.tv. I got a hell of a show for you today. I got Jon Pounders from Pounders Quest going to be co-hosting with me, Timothy Alberino. And most of you are probably very familiar with Timothy Alberino, but if you're not, he's an author, lecturer, and explorer, like a real-life Indiana Jones. And there's his book, Birthright, whose work bridges the gap between history, mythology, and biblical scholarship. His best-selling book right here, Birthright, 2020 has garnered a widespread acclaim and a lot of attention. Folks, welcome Timothy Alberino and Jon Pounders. Guys, thank you so much for joining me. It's an honor. Jon, man, I love having you on the show, brother. Every time you get the rebound and you dunk the ball whenever I need it done. Timothy, I just watched a podcast with you, and I can't remember the show it was on. I've watched quite a few of your shows. And dude, your boots on the ground, you're out there really doing this work, which I can say for most people who claim to be experts, maybe they just watch a lot of YouTube videos or just research the material, but you're actually out there in the field doing this stuff. So you know a lot about what's going on. And today's subject I want to talk about is giants. I was watching this show with you saying, hey, man, the government will talk to you all day. Government insiders will talk all day about aliens. But the one thing they will not touch is giants. Now, I've seen videos on the internet that circulate, which I'm sure a lot of people have seen, of giants in caves. I've seen one in a cave. I mean, they don't look AI to me. And it was before AI, actually. So what got you interested in this? And I hope you could shine some light on this for us. But why are giants so protected? Why does nobody want to talk about them? And why is there an interest in giants?
Well, gentlemen, thanks for having me back on. It's a pleasure to be with you again. Yeah, the topic of giants seems to be more, at least in my experience, seems to be more highly classified than aliens and UFOs. Just again, from personal, this is a very subjective view of mine based on my interaction with, let's say, particular individuals who are in a position to know things. Most of these individuals that I've talked to, whistleblower type individuals, are fairly open about aliens and UFOs. I think also because there's a climate now in the media and in government, there's an openness that did not exist 10 years ago, say. Whereas we haven't reached that level with the topic of giants. Giants is still securely in the realm of mythology in most people's minds. But I've encountered individuals in government, military, who, again, in a private conversation will be very open about aliens and UFOs, even saying things to me that they would never say publicly. But then when giants are brought up, the conversation ends. Or there's a warning, not a threat.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that they don't want people knowing about giants, but UFOs and
I don't know. It's a really good question. There's a lot of seemingly simple answers that people have offered over the years. They don't seem to. They're not satisfying to me. The most parroted answer to that question is that the existence of giants proves the veracity of the Bible, which I don't deny. I think that that's true, but it's not exclusive to the biblical narrative. The giants, the mythology of giants is everywhere, all over the world in every ancient culture, and especially in the ancient Near East.
Well, do you think in an age that we're living in right now with the New Agers and this alien card the government's getting ready to play, they want to kind of steer you away from the Bible, right? They want to steer you away from aliens being, the fallen, the Nephilim. Maybe they want to, for humanity to accept alien life as our brethren, right? And the giants, like you said, would take us right back to the Bible and prove the validity of the Bible. They won't be able to play the alien card, in other words.
I actually believe that the cover-up of giants has to do with the occult. I think the topic of giants is intimately interlaced with the occult. Whereas when you talk about the cover-up of UFOs and the legacy crash retrieval programs, you're talking about functional technology. A lot of the cover-up revolves around not just the existence of these creatures, the biologics that are associated with the crash retrievals, but also the reverse engineering of the technology, the derivative technology. And that explains, there's national security interests there. There's competitive advantages that the military wants to maintain over other nations. So you have there's a whole lot of reasons for the UFO cover-up. But as it pertains to giants, I think that the primary reason, this is again just my opinion, I think that the primary reason here is associated with the occult. I think that there is an attempt. Let me rephrase this. I think that the remains of giants, the bones of giants, are used in occultic ceremonies whose purpose is to summon, to invoke the spirits of those dead giants, which according to the Second Temple literature, the spirits of the giants are dead Nephilim. And so the dead Nephilim are still alive in the world as disembodied, unclean, or evil spirits. And they seem to be somehow still connected with their remains. At least maybe this is what the occult practitioners believe. Certainly this was the idea in the ancient world. Because if you look at the Canaanite cultures during biblical times, they practiced necromancy, and that necromancy revolved around the 𝗵𝗲𝗶𝗋, the Nephilim, the clans of giants, specifically an attempt to make contact or to be imbued with the power, the essence, the fortitude, the spirit of a dead giant. And this is, by the way, this is part of the purpose of the dolmens, and certainly this is the purpose of the megalithic tombs that you find not only in the Middle East, but also on the island of Sardinia, for example, in southern Spain, on the island of Menorca, in different places throughout the Mediterranean. You find these megalithic tombs, and in many of the cases, the tombs have a very small doorway, like a little doggy door in them. And the idea has been that the idea that's proliferated in archaeology is that these tombs held like the bodies of noble families or whatever, but they're missing the point because they don't understand the Canaanite practice of necromancy. The tombs were designed as incubation chambers, where the young people, it was a rite of passage where the young people would go into them. That's why the doggy door, it's a small door for a young person to crawl into. Like we're talking whatever the age of, whatever the what's the terminology here, where the young person is considered an adult in the ancient world,
maybe like the rite of passage.
Yeah, when they would go through the rite of passage, it was much younger back then than it is today. We consider an adult like an 18 to 20-year-old, right? That's when you're kind of passing into adulthood in our modern culture. But in the ancient world, it was way younger than that. It was like 14 years old. I mean, people were getting married at 15 and having kids. So it was like 13, 14, maybe even 12 years old in some cultures.
Crazy.
That was the passage into adulthood, because you had to assume a lot more responsibility in the ancient world as especially a young male. And you were going to war. I mean, 15, 16-year-olds were going to fight, in hand-to-hand combat in these ancient cultures. So you were a man a lot earlier than you are today in the ancient world. So the rite of passage involved 12, 13, 14-year-olds, somewhere in that range. And they would crawl into these tombs, these incubation chambers, and those chambers would be sealed. And the young person would be incubating inside of the chamber. And the whole idea here, the procedure, is to make contact with the spirit of the mighty one, of the 𝗵𝗲𝗋, the 𝗬𝗶𝗱𝗲 buried beneath, which I believe in many cases was a giant or giants, plural. And so this is necromancy. Necromancy is communication with the dead, or the attempt to reanimate the dead. especially to reanimate the dead. And in this case, you know, these tombs, maybe they operated like, maybe the operation of the rite of incubation was to demonize these young people. That's a possibility. And so are modern practitioners of the occult practicing Canaanite necromancy? And are they using the bones of giants to summon the spirits of dead giants, which are the demons of the New Testament? Harness their power, inquire of their knowledge, and just generally speaking, commune with these demonic entities? I think the answer to that question is yes. And I think that that is at the heart of the cover-up of the remains of giants.
Do you think we can lump them all in together, like the giants, the aliens, Sasquatch? Would you say they're all lumped into the Nephilim? I mean, can we just say what we don't understand? We'll just throw them all into the one big net and call it the Nephilim? Or do you think there's categories here, subcategories? It's gray, or is it?
Yeah, I would be very hesitant to lump everything into one category like that. The world is a very complex place with a lot of things going on, and we know very little. Even the total sum of human knowledge is a drop in the bucket compared to the totality of what there is to know. And I'm very specific. I constrain the term Nephilim to its biblical context, which within the biblical context, a Nephilim, or the Nephilim rather, because that's a plural term, are giants. That's what they are, biblically speaking, always, in every case. Nephilim are giants. And the descendants of the giants have various clan names, like the Anakim, who the Bible says were descended from the Nephilim. And then you have the 𝗬𝗵𝗶𝗃 and the 𝗵𝗵 and, you know, the 𝗵𝗃𝗃 and various clans of giants that were scattered throughout the highlands of the Levant, the hill country. These are the tribes of giants that Joshua and the Hebrews had conflict with and were exterminating in the Promised Land. They were devoting them to destruction. It was a holocaust of giants, a divinely orchestrated holocaust of the offspring of the Nephilim, and that's what within the biblical context, even extra biblical material, Nephilim are exclusively giants, and the giants are exclusively the offspring of the Watchers and human women.
So hold on, the Watchers, they mated with human women. Okay, sorry. I think I'm stating the obvious here. How'd they do that? They were giants and they're mating with a 5'4" woman. I mean, how is that? That's a huge task.
The Watchers themselves, I don't believe, were giants.
Okay.
Their offspring were giants. The Watchers, this of course is referenced in Genesis 6. There's the writer of Genesis, perhaps Moses, in Genesis 6, he engages in this bizarre digression in the narrative, in the Genesis narrative, and he talks about the sons of God who saw the daughters of men, that they were comely, and they took wives among all whom they chose, and then they copulated with these women, and the result was a race of giants. Now that story is a reference to a larger narrative that was obviously well known to the ancient Hebrews. So the author of Genesis he's only making mention of this. He's not extrapolating out anything from this reference. He's simply clearly referencing an anecdote that was widely known to the readers, right? That would have been widely known to the audience. And that story is enlarged in the book of Enoch. And the book of Enoch uses the same language to describe the sons of God, the angel. By the way, in Genesis 6, where it says the sons of God, in the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament, it says the angels. So the angels were lusting after human women in Genesis 6, according to the Septuagint, which is the correct rendering. And then you find out in the book of Enoch that it's a specific group of angels called Watchers. And the Watcher designation is not exclusive to the book of Enoch, or it's not exclusively extra biblical. Rather, it's found in the book of Daniel. in a very interesting scenario in which the Watchers are judging Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, right? And so you have the Watchers are a holy order of angelic beings. They're at the upper end of the hierarchy, so to speak, of angelic beings. I think they're members of what the late Dr. Mike Heiser described as the Divine Council. And the 200 of these beings, Watchers, defected, descended to the earth, and they were enamored of human women. They chose wives among the daughters of men. They wed them. They took them to wife, and then they copulated and progenerated through them a race of hybrid giants. And those giants were part Watcher, part human. And that is the origin of giants. And by the way, that's the origin of giants in the ancient world, generally speaking, that the giants were the offspring of gods and men. So giants are always thought of as hybrids in most of the primary ancient cultures. I dare I say all of the primary ancient cultures, the giants were the offspring of the gods and men. So they were demigod hybrids. And this is certainly the way that they're depicted in the Bible and in the extra biblical texts, especially the book of Enoch.
Do you think that these giants are, I mean, we all heard of the story, the Kandahar giant, right? And it was a feral giant living in a cave, 6 fingers, 6 toes, redheaded. It sounded like he was a madman, right? Attacked, I think it was 2 units of soldiers. I don't know if they're special infantry. I'm not sure. Maybe you could tell the story, a little recap on it a little bit for my audience. But are they super intelligent or are they kind of primitive?
Well, it depends on their cultural background. I think they're going to be influenced by the culture in which they're raised. I mean, in the Canaanite world, back in the Bronze Age or the Iron Age, the giants do not appear to be any more advanced than the other civilizations surrounding them, non-giant clans, right? So the giant clans, the non-giant clans seem to have the same level of civilization. Maybe it could be argued that like the walls of Jericho were megalithic, and maybe the giants were building much more impressive structures, buildings. I don't know. I mean, that I suppose that can be argued, but the giants of the antediluvian world, I think, were exceedingly advanced. However, giants who are alive today, like in Afghanistan, I believe are very primitive. Just like the culture, the Afghanis out there who are living in the desert are very primitive people. You know, these are you know, for all intents and purposes, they're living in almost an Iron Age world still out there in the deserts of Afghanistan. And so the giants out there are, as you said, I think very correctly, feral. They're wild. Certainly the stories of giants I've heard from Afghanistan depict them in this way. The Kandahar giant story, that began a long time ago. That began, you know, maybe it was popularized, I think, I want to say back in 2012, 13 or 14 by Steve Quayle. I worked with Steve Quayle for 7 years.
And 𝗬𝗏𝗻𝗄𝗎 as well, correct?
Well, first Steve broke the story. And this is when I was working with Steve. He was contacted by this elderly woman who told him that her son was an active duty C-130 pilot, and that he had a story that he needed to tell, and or that Steve needed to hear, and she convinced her son to contact Steve Quayle, and her son made contact with Steve. Steve interviewed him. They went on Coast to Coast AM together and featured the testimony of the pilot, and then Steve and I were doing a documentary in our True Legends series. Actually, it was on the Unholy Sea. This is the second installment, called the Unholy Sea, and we wanted to feature the pilot's story at the beginning of the documentary. So we flew him into Bozeman, and we filmed him in silhouette. He didn't want his face on camera. We filmed him in silhouette here in Bozeman, and this isn't secondhand testimony. It's firsthand testimony.
He flew the helicopter.
He was, well, it was a C-130. He was and he showed us his credentials, by the way, all of his credentials checked out. He was active duty, C-130 pilot. He was flying missions into Afghanistan back in, the early 2000s. And in 2005, he flew into Bagram Airfield, and he would fly routinely into Bagram Airfield to pick up what he designated as what were designated as high value assets. Usually, he said it was Taliban guys, and it was always classified. These missions flying into Bagram, but on this particular occasion, he thought it was just a routine mission. He landed on the airfield, and he was met at his aircraft by by individuals he describes as the babysitters, and these individuals seemed to be Air Force intelligence, something like that, IC guys, intelligence community guys. And I've been getting this detail wrong. It's just a minor detail, but I'll correct it here on your show. I said that they escorted him to the hangar. That's a minor detail. I realized the other day I was getting that wrong. They didn't escort him to the hangar. They met him on the tarmac, and they brought the body of a giant to him on a pallet to be loaded onto the AC-130. And rather, I'm sorry, not the AC-130, the C-130. AC-130 is a gunship. C-130 is a transport ship onto the C-130. And this gigantic being was covered in a tarp, and he was on a Air Force pallet and on an air cargo pallet, which are very large and heavy pallets. These aren't just like, the kind of pallets that a typical warehouse has. These are very large pallets, and they're about 9 feet long. And this gigantic person was in the fetal position under a tarp, but he was so large that even in the fetal position, his head and his hands and his feet were hanging out. I'm on an interview, buddy.
It's all right, man.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
So his hands and feet and head were hanging out, and the pilot told us that the first thing that his first experience with his body was the stench. He said it was just overpowering. It was like excessive BO mixed with death. He said he'd never smelled anything like it before. It was just overpowering. And when they put the pallet down to be loaded, there was a couple of military guys accompanying it and the babysitters. And he said that this being had red hair. It had the skin was pale. It was whitish pale. He didn't know if that was because it had been dead for a couple of days or if that was the natural hue of the skin. The hands and feet had 6 fingers and 6 toes. The feet were wrapped in a crude canvas wrap. And the feet were so large, he said he and the other guys were putting their boots up to the foot just to compare how big the foot of the giant was to their boot. And it was much larger. They estimated this guy, he had to be between 10 and 12 feet tall. And he's in a fetal position on a 9-foot-long pallet, right? And he's hanging off of it. They weighed him, and when they subtracted the weight of the pallet, because you have to weigh whatever goes on the load master has to weigh whatever's going on that C-130. After they subtracted the weight of the pallet, the guy weighed 1,100 pounds. So you're looking at a 10 to 12 foot tall person, male, 6 fingers, 6 toes, red hair, 1,100 pounds. And the pilot told us that he was so dense, muscular, that they were all just pounding him with their fists. And he said it was like a brick. And the guy was, laying on the pallet sideways, the giant, and he was so large that he came up to their chest, to their waist, to their midsection. That's how broad this dude was. And he was told by the soldiers accompanying, maybe these were special ops guys and the babysitter standing there, but he was told by the special ops guys that he didn't know if they were special ops or Marines. He didn't know who they were, but he was told that the giant had been killed in a cave out in Afghanistan. There was a company of soldiers that went out there. A team of guys went out there looking for Taliban. They noticed that there was this cave, and there was a village nearby. The villagers were venerating and they were venerating something in the cave because they were bringing food, they were bringing drinks and various items, artifacts to the mouth of the cave. And the team supposed that this was the Taliban or something, and they either went into
and
the
giving
cave,
to the Taliban. That's what
aiding and abetting the Taliban, and so they went into the cave, or this thing came out of the cave. It's not clear, but they encountered this giant who allegedly killed them all. And then another team was dispatched to go and find these guys. And when they found their remains, and they found them either in the proximity or of the cave or in the cave, and they encountered the giant. But this time they were ready because they were alert, knowing that these guys, probably thinking the guys were taken out by the Taliban, right? And they were able to take the giant down. And then the giant was airlifted by helicopter to Bagram to be picked up by our pilot. So there's another story that came out after this other story came out after our pilot, after Steve Quayle and myself interviewed this pilot. This other whistleblower came to the researcher, 𝗬𝗓, told him a similar story. And LA and I have talked about this. We're not sure if this is the same story or if this is a different story that was told to LA. I don't know if it's the same. They say it happened in 2003, the one that they told to LA. Our pilot said it was 2005. Maybe they're getting their dates wrong. But a lot of the details seem to be similar. In LA's story, one of the guys got speared by the giant, only one of them. So maybe there's just some conflation between the two stories and it's the same event, or maybe there have been multiple events. Now, I will say this. There have been multiple events. I've talked to some individuals who, and I hate to be like this, but I have to because I'm very careful with my sources. I've talked to individuals who have confirmed the Kandahar giant story, or at least the general narrative, right, of giants in Kandahar who've killed U.S. military personnel, and I've heard other stories, even that are even wilder than that, from very high-ranking individuals. I've heard them from guys that were special ops, and then I've heard them guys that were much above special ops, you know, in the rank and file, in the not the rank and file, in the brass level. Okay, so I've had this story confirmed to me multiple times, this and other stories related to the giants in Afghanistan. And one individual who told me a story, a different story, again, even more shocking than that one, he was threatened. And so I have to be very careful because I really like this guy a lot and I don't want to get anybody in trouble. He was directly threatened after he told me some details.
To not speak about this at all, basically.
Well, he was actually threatened after he told me some other things. And then he decided to tell me some details, some more details, but in a very strategic environment. Let's put it that way. So these guys, you know, they risk a lot when they come forward. I have no doubt people have been killed, you know, have crashed into trees while driving their vehicles down the road. And as a result of having talked to people like me. So, and I'm not saying that to be dramatic. This is why so many people are hesitant to talk about, this is what it used to be in the UFO world, but not so much anymore, but it still exists. The threats are still out there, but nobody's really talking about giants to the extent that people are talking about UFOs publicly. And so this topic is still very taboo.
The UFO, I wanted to say something real quick. The UFO community seems to be kind of, it just seems to be all scattered. Like some people believe this, some people believe this. Everybody seems to have their own research that they're talking about, that some of it seems to be like counterproductive, you know, like for instance, the Pentagon will say nothing's there, and then they'll release these like blurry videos of like Tic Tacs and all this stuff. Whereas the giants, it doesn't seem that there's really anybody talking about this very much at all. Like it's really, really strange the way it is. But this is just a story, and I want to see what you guys think about this. A friend of mine who works for the Forestry Service, actually a national park, and they have areas where they do not burn, like no burn orders in certain parts of the forest. And it just so happens that these areas are where they have the most sightings of paranormal type things like Sasquatch, dogmen type things like that. Is there a connection to Sasquatch, dogmen, and these Nephilim? Because they seem to have technologies too, like technologies to be able to beam stuff into people's head. And all of these things are associated with this one area right in the middle of Hoosier National Forest. It's very strange.
The short answer is I have no idea whether or not these things are directly associated. I suspect they are not. And the reason why I suspect they are not is because, as we were talking about earlier, I would hesitate to categorize everything as Nephilim, because Nephilim are giants. Just because Bigfoot is tall, I mean, the Bigfoot is 8, 9, 10 feet tall, maybe even up to 12. Just because it happens to be of gigantic stature does not automatically indicate that it's Nephilim. 𝗀𝗂𝗶𝗃𝗃 was a Ice Age gigantic ape, right? That perhaps was bipedal.
But did it have supernatural ability to kind of just be elusive is the question. Like, these things seem to have supernatural type abilities. I mean, a lot of the research that I've seen from people that go out there into the woods, like some of these things will follow them home and, haunt them in different ways. So like, that's what I'm saying. Like, I mean, at least it's a hybrid of some sort, right? I mean, I guess it could be a race of ape that has weird supernatural abilities to stay
Well, I'm
hidden.
not saying it's a race of ape. I was just illustrating that just because something is gigantic doesn't necessarily mean it ties into the Nephilim. I don't think that I don't know what Bigfoot is, but I believe it's real for sure. There's some active cases of Bigfoot that I've been pursuing here in Montana that are outrageous. I mean, they're just crazy stories. It seems to me that whatever this creature is, that the Sasquatch is telepathic. That seems to be clear. It's telepathic. And I think that some of these entities are able to manipulate human perception. And if you can manipulate human perception, then you can distort our perceptual experience. So we can have a very subjective experience based on our perception, when in reality, what's happening is a manipulation of our perception, like a virtual reality scenario or something like that. That seems to be the case. Now, I spoke to, I had a conversation with Eric Bard. Eric Bard is the chief investigator at Skinwalker Ranch. Thank you. Jeez, yeah. I just drew a blank there. At Skinwalker Ranch. And Eric Bard is a brilliant guy. I mean, really, really smart guy, very science-based. He himself is a scientist and an inventor. And I had a very candid conversation with him, and I asked him about the bizarre, him as a scientist, what does he think about the bizarre phenomenon that's happened at Skinwalker Ranch? And he said two interesting things to me, which completely confirmed and correlated with my thoughts about these things. And he said that, first of all, you have to be careful with people's stories because he has discovered, being the lead investigator out there, having access to the ranch 24/7, and knowing all of the players who are currently involved and have been involved in the ranch. He believes that many of the stories were wildly exaggerated. Okay, that's just kind of ancillary information there. But then secondarily, he said to me that he also believes that whatever's happening on the ranch, that we are encountering something there, he told me, that has the power to manipulate our perception. In other words, something is interacting with their brains, with their psyche, and causing them to see things and causing them to perceive things that maybe are not, in actuality, maybe are not confirmed. Let's say let me be specific. The dire wolf situation, the wolf, the bulletproof wolf that's famous from Skinwalker Ranch, from the Skinwalker Ranch lore, that has been encountered on several occasions. People have, discharged their rifles at this thing, and it doesn't seem to take any kind of damage at all or react. That's why they've called it the bulletproof wolf, and that this wolf seems to be some sort of a supernatural creature, when in reality, it's very possible that that wolf is a figment of perceptual manipulation in order to hide something. And so the way I think about it with Bigfoot is I think about this as a camouflage mechanism. So if you are highly telepathic, being telepathic, which I believe, controversially, I believe that Adam and Eve were telepathic. I believe that the human species was fundamentally telepathic, but we've degenerated and we've lost these capabilities. But if you are telepathic, that means that you are engaging some mechanism of the human brain or of human consciousness that is extremely powerful. You're generating some kind of, I don't know what you would call it, a signal, a wave, something, and you're able to interact with other people's minds, with their consciousness in a way that is imperceivable. So not only so telepathic engagement doesn't only mean that you can interact with let's say a telepathic Bigfoot and hear words in your head, or you're getting feelings, interpreting. It's not necessarily words in some cases. It's more of a feeling that you are interpreting into words, or you're getting pictures, images in your mind. All of those things fall under the telepathic capability.
I want to show, Alex was showing a picture right now. This is actually a real photo from Alex's friend, who was Alex, who was this guy? Your friend, a firefighter, right, in California when they were having the fires? Alex?
Yes, that's correct. It was given to the picture was given to him actually by firefighters. This was back in 2016. They saw this creature on the other side of the river, and you can see the Trinity River in the foreground, and they started kind of yelling and making noise, trying to get its attention. And it was just walking along kind of a bluff ridge out there. And that's what you're seeing here. So I'll zoom in.
Sure. This is pretty incredible. And this is what Alex sent me a while back. I told him to bring it up on the, so there's the smoke. You can see the haze of the smoke. And then when you kind of zoom in a little bit, there he is right there walking.
Yeah. The Bigfoot creature is intriguing because it's clearly physical. I mean, it leaves physical, it leaves tracks, hair. You know, there's a lot of people who've reported having Bigfoot hair, finding Bigfoot.
Haven't they done DNA on them and found that it has
I would be cautious with I'd be cautious with those DNA results.
Okay.
But clearly the Bigfoot is a physical creature, but it also seems to have, there seems to be paranormal attributes associated with with people's encounters as well. And that can also be said for gray aliens, right? And I think that what's happening here is that where human beings are extremely susceptible to manipulation. We're susceptible to manipulation in regard to just information in general, because we don't really know a whole lot as a human species. We think we do. We like to think we do, but I don't think we really know a whole lot about the planet we live on and about the universe itself. We're infants in that sense, right? So it's easy to manipulate me or you as an adult. It's very easy to manipulate a toddler simply because we have way more knowledge than a toddler, right? And we're much more mature in that knowledge. We understand the world in a way that the toddler cannot comprehend it. And so you can easily manipulate a toddler as an adult. But also, aside from just manipulation on an informational level, as I said before, I think these beings can manipulate us perceptually. They can manipulate our perception of them and our perception of our encounters with them. Now, that doesn't happen all the time. Sometimes people just see like a Bigfoot walking around in the woods and making a lot of noise, throwing logs around, or, being very evasive, dodging behind trees or whatever. Some people have had rocks thrown at them from Bigfoot, right? So these are very physical encounters. Bigfoots have shaken people's tents with them inside of them. In one famous story, they picked up a guy in his sleeping bag and threw him over his shoulder, and took him to its clan. We interviewed a guy or a individual who was working with us went to the Solomon Islands and interviewed this man who had been taken captive by Bigfoot-like creatures in the Solomon Islands and taken underground to like their clan. And the whole thing was very, very physical experience. I mean, it was very viscerally physical. So I think we can say confidently that Sasquatch is physical. The question is he also metaphysical, paranormal, supernatural, however you want it, or are we encountering a creature that is physical but has extremely powerful, let's call them psionic capabilities to engage with the human psyche, engage with the human mind, and manipulate it? So I have there's a story that I'm tracking. There's several Bigfoot stories I'm tracking with right now. They're ongoing. One of which, the guy at the center of this story, he walks out of his house. He lives on the edge of a state park. He walks out of his house, and there's a Bigfoot standing there. Or actually, I'm sorry, he opens the door, his front door, and there's a Bigfoot standing there, and it's just staring at him. And he's got his shotgun next to the door, and he slowly reaches for his shotgun, and the Bigfoot communicates to him telepathically, "You don't need to do that. You don't need to do that." And then it tells him, "Step out into the light so I can get a good look at you." Telepathically. He steps out of his house into the light, and the Bigfoot just looks him over. This is a close encounter, by the way. I forget how close, 15, 20 feet, something like that. The Bigfoot looks him over and then turns around and begins to walk away and then vanishes. And so here's the question. Analyzing this story, if we're careful, we can, and he had been having interactions with this Bigfoot, by the way, previous to this, very physical interactions with this Bigfoot previous to this episode. So assuming that the story is true, of course, starting there, we can interpret this in a couple of different ways. This is a very physical contact with Bigfoot, with Sasquatch. There's a telepathic communication happening. So we know that the Bigfoot is already plugged into the guy's perception because there's telepathic communication. So when that Bigfoot turns around and vanishes, are we looking at A, supernaturalism, B, technology, or C, perceptual manipulation, or a combination of all three?
Here's an example of that right here, Timothy. I don't know if Alex can play that again. I caught this on a video, Maximum Fear. This guy, this was filmed in Mexico on someone's phone or whatever device. And this guy, it looks like a Mexican guy in a hat, drops his hat and turns into a coyote right there. Now, to me, I mean, this is wild stuff. Whether you want to say it's real or not, that's up to debate. But this was
with today with the artificial intelligence, I mean,
I mean, you never know.
Believe everything I see at this point. I mean, I don't know. Even the stories I hear about Bigfoot, I don't know if they're real. I don't know if anybody's Bigfoot stories are. I suspect many people's Bigfoot stories are real. But we have to add into the equation here, we have to add in perceptual manipulation, because if you can communicate telepathically, you're already locked into something in the perceptual realm, right? So what else can be done? We know people have received images in their minds from Bigfoot, right? That's part of the phenomenon here. So if you can receive an image in your mind, then when that Bigfoot turns around, walks away, and vanishes, did it actually vanish? Or is this perceptual camouflage? Did it make you think it vanished? But in reality, it put up a blinder, it put up a smoke screen, so to speak, a perceptual smoke screen in your mind, and it just walked away in the woods. It left the footprints, right? So I don't know which of these three things is happening, or if it's a combination of three. Again, supernaturalism, technology, or perceptual manipulation. I doubt, and I'll say this about supernaturalism. I famously don't like the term supernatural because it doesn't really mean anything. It has no explanatory power. Supernatural comes from it's not a biblical term, by the way. It comes from the Latin supernaturalis, which means above or beyond nature. And the problem with the word supernatural is once we understand the given mechanism behind something that we once thought was supernatural, it ceases to be super and is only then natural, right? So I think that when we invoke supernaturalism, what we're saying is we don't know what the hell we're talking about.
We don't know what we're looking at.
I mean, it's just like it's a word that doesn't really mean anything because could we understand what's actually happening? And if we gain insight into what's actually happening, whether it's perceptual manipulation or technology, it's demystified at that point, right? So I think we're looking at
once you understand it, it loses the appeal of supernatural. That's it. You understand it, you know how it works.
Exactly right. It ceases to become super and is only then natural.
Yeah,
right?
It's just natural, correct.
And of course, 𝗬𝗏𝗏 Clarke famously said that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And I would say, I would add indistinguishable from supernaturalism, right? So I do believe in a supernatural being. That being is God. So God is above nature. God is above nature. He is beyond nature. He's above nature. He is, by definition, supernatural. So I don't deny the supernatural. I don't deny miracles and things like that because the Spirit of God can do whatever he pleases. I mean, God created this place. He can manipulate the architecture of matter whenever he wants, however he wants. People think I deny, miracles and other supernatural events. I do not, because I believe in a supernatural God. But I don't believe that any other creatures of created order are by definition supernatural outside of God.
Fair enough. Timothy, let's show Timothy's book again. Guys, I got a hard stop. This was an amazing podcast. I appreciate you coming on, Jon Pounders. You too, Timothy. Birthright, there it is, folks. Timothy Alberino. Man, dude, I love you. You bring the heat every time you come on. I know I respect you. I respect the work you do. John, I know you do too. John, do you have anything else you want to say before we part?
Yeah, I got a question for Timothy because I think that, all of this talk about this needs some kind of resolution to like what people can expect out of this. What do you see happening within the next few years? Do you think that there's an answer in scripture for this? What's your thoughts on all of this, man? Like to sum it up, like what should people be doing to protect themselves against this kind of thing?
Are we talking about the giants, Sasquatch, or
all
UFO
of it?
stuff?
All of the above, man. All of the above.
Well, obviously, we all know that the giants. There's obviously biblical explanation for giants. The Bible doesn't talk about Sasquatch. It doesn't. That doesn't mean that Sasquatch doesn't exist. I'm very, very much persuaded that Sasquatch is real. Yeah. And in regard to UFO stuff, that's a very, very complex, convoluted topic. What the nature of these beings are, who they are. I think there's multiple factions in play. I think we have to be very careful when we attempt to understand and to define what's happening in that space, because technology in and of itself, like if you see a UFO hovering above your house today, you can't make a judgment of that technology's morals or allegiances or whatever, because it's just hardware. The question is, who's piloting it and what are their intentions and allegiance? That's a big question to me. Intentions and allegiance. I guess you could say the same thing about Bigfoot, right? What are they doing? Is what they're doing nefarious? Is it innocuous? Is it benevolent? And what is their allegiance as a Christian? My question would be, what is their allegiance? Are they aligned with the kingdom of heaven and its king? Or are they opposed to him, or are they attempting to take some sort of a neutral stance? Those are the only questions that matter to me.
So are they angelic or demonic?
Exactly right.
Right.
I think that's a very accurate, simplistic way to put it. Are they angelic? In other words, are they in alignment with the kingdom of heaven, or are they opposed to it? And that question cannot be answered by looking at hardware. Cannot be answered.
I guess what I'm asking,
there's nothing about a UFO,
like,
a flying saucer that communicates any kind of allegiance. It's just technology. So, we'd have to devolve into a very technical discussion about, do angels Do angels manufacture and utilize technology? Do the good guys do it? Do the bad guys do it? Are they both doing it? What are gray aliens? I mean, that's a very long, complicated conversation. But my advice is always the same. As a Christian, I think what we need to make sure we're doing is rooting ourselves deeply, firmly, anchoring ourselves in the gospel of Christ, understanding what the gospel is, who Jesus was, that he came in the flesh, he died on the cross, he was buried, and he was raised on the third day. That's the rock. That's the rock upon which the church is built. And that is the thing that we ought to be very clear about. And everything else sort of, you sort of just let the chips fall where they may after that. Yeah. That's kind of
I guess another thing too that I was kind of hinting at too is like, as far as the upcoming disclosure, it's everywhere. You're involved with some people that are talking about disclosure, and it's like this big deal. How do you see that playing into end times deception? Because obviously, yeah. Go ahead.
I see what you mean. I think there's a very distinct possibility. I'm going to make this prediction here. Now, I'm not certain of this. Okay. I think there's a distinct possibility that Trump announces the existence of non-human intelligence. Broadly speaking, maybe even more narrowly, he will announce the existence of extraterrestrial beings, possibly this year, maybe the last year of his term. I say strong possibility, but I think there's a 50% chance that happens. Okay, from things I'm hearing. Now, in regard to disclosure, I know a lot of people are frustrated with this whole process, but the real work that's being, I can tell you this without a shadow of a doubt, there is a real effort behind the scenes to get oversight in regard to the 𝗬𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗏 program, the reverse engineering and exploitation of non-human technology. There's a real effort because in some sense, the agencies and organizations working on this thing have gone rogue. And when I say they've gone rogue, what I mean is they're not under the direct jurisdiction of the American people, which is everything's supposed to be under the jurisdiction of the American people, corporately speaking, right? According to the Constitution, and they're not. These programs are not. They even get black money for funding, which puts them completely outside of any kind of accountability. So they're doing things that are illegal, and in some cases, extremely nefarious. And there are people at the governmental level and whistleblowers who are working with people at the governmental level who are very, very enthusiastic and who, in fact, are on a crusade to get this stuff under control, to prosecute the bad actors, and to root out the nefarious activities that are associated with some of these rogue elements. And we're talking about human trafficking. We're talking about experimentation on human beings, illegal hybridization projects, right? Experimentations. Yeah. And that to me is a noble crusade. And and some of the people that are in this group or are in this crusade, so to speak, they want their effort is to get the receipts, bring them before the administration and before the highest echelons of government, right? And give them an opportunity to redress it, to tell the truth to the American people and prosecute the bad guys and root out the nefarious activities. That is underway. Okay, I can tell you that. And I know that that's true. And I myself would consider myself one of those crusaders. Not that I have much to offer in this field to anybody in the Trump administration, but I interact with these guys. I'm for them, and I think this is very, very a very noble endeavor. And a lot of these guys, they get a lot of crap online because people, they don't understand the things that are actually going on behind the scenes and the motivations to prosecute the nefarious actors or the bad actors who are committing egregious crimes and have been for decades in the name of national security.
Well,
Guys, I got to wrap it up. This has been amazing. Timothy Alberino. Show his book one more time, Alex, man. Make sure you get over. It's on Amazon, right, Timothy?
Yeah, it's on Amazon. Yep.
There it is, Birthright. And you wrote that, what, 2020?
2020, yeah. I published it on, as it turns out, I published it on Halloween evening. That wasn't purposeful, by the way. It was just when it was ready to be published. I almost didn't do it because I thought, I'm going to get a lot of crap for this, but I did it anyway.
Well, at least you addressed it. It's all good, man.
Yeah. But hey, man, thanks so much, guys, for having me on. You guys are great. You make a great team, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I think so too, John. Hey, yo.
Yeah, man. I enjoy coming on with you, man. And Timothy, I've seen a lot of your stuff over the years, and you do get a lot of flack. There's no doubt. But anytime that's the weird thing is, like, when you're honest about your research, even when you don't want to be dogmatic about things, people hate that, man. Like, you have to pick one side or the other. That's just the way simple minds think, and I see you get a lot of flack for that, and as well as do I, and I'm sure Nino does as well. So
it's all part of it, man. I'll tell you what, it's all part of it, guys.
Well, I've got bigger enemies to worry about than trolls on the internet.
You do. Yes, you do. Timothy, stay with me just for a moment. John, stay with me just for a moment. All right, folks, we'll see you later. Please like, share, and subscribe, and get Timothy's book. Thank you.